The roar of the crowd, the clash of titans inside a caged octagon, the knockout that sends shockwaves around the world. This is the Ultimate Fighting Championship, the global phenomenon that has redefined combat sports. But beyond the pay-per-view spectacle and the legendary highlight reels lies a world of hidden details, shocking truths, and untold stories. You think you know the UFC? Think again. From its controversial origins and backstage politics to bizarre fighter rituals and rules you never knew existed, there's so much more beneath the surface. Today, we're peeling back the curtain to reveal 20 surprising secrets that will forever change the way you watch the sport. The UFC is more than just a fight, it's a universe of untold tales. Let's dive in. Fact 1. It is the most famous proving ground in all of combat sports. A structure of chain-link fence, canvas, and steel measuring 30 feet across. But the 8-sided cage known as the Octagon is more than just a fighting surface. It's a carefully protected piece of intellectual property. In a move of incredible business foresight, the UFC's parent company Zuffa secured the trademark for the word Octagon in the context of mixed martial arts. This masterstroke prevents any other promotion from marketing their own 8-sided enclosure with that iconic name. Competitors can build a similar cage, but they can never invite their fighters to step inside the Octagon. That term, and all the prestige and history it carries, belongs exclusively to the UFC. It's a powerful example of how the company's battles in the boardroom have been just as crucial to its global dominance as the wars waged inside its signature structure, cementing the brand in the mind of the public. Fact 2. Perhaps no single image better captures the beautiful, brutal confusion of the very first UFC event than that of professional boxer Art Jimmerson entering the Octagon with a single boxing glove. It was a strategy born of pure uncertainty. Jimmerson, a top-ranked cruiserweight, wanted to protect his lead jab hand, his moneymaker, while keeping his other hand free to fend off the mysterious grappling attacks he'd only heard about. His opponent was Royce Gracie. The fight itself was a swift and decisive lesson. Jimmerson was taken to the mat almost immediately, finding himself in a world he couldn't comprehend. Pinned and controlled, with Gracie in a dominant mount position, Jimmerson submitted before a submission hold was even fully applied. In a testament to the paradigm shift that was occurring, the boxer, famous for his fists, left the cage without ever having thrown a single punch. His one-gloved entry remains an iconic, almost comical symbol of an entire generation of martial artists realizing that the rules of fighting had just been rewritten forever. Fact 3. Before it was the Ultimate Fighting Championship, before the 3 letters UFC became a global brand synonymous with mixed martial arts, the creators had a different, more theatrical name in mind: War of the Worlds. The title wasn't meant to suggest an alien invasion, but something almost as foreign to the public eye. It was a clash of disciplines, a collision of entire philosophies of combat that had, until then, existed in separate universes. For the first time, a Savate kickboxer could face a hulking sumo wrestler. The disciplined strikes of a karate master would meet the suffocating ground game of a jiu-jitsu practitioner. Each style was its own planet, with its own rules, traditions, and champions. The event was designed to be a crucible, forcing these worlds to collide in a tournament to finally answer the age-old question: which fighting style reigns supreme? While the name was ultimately scrapped, it perfectly captured the chaotic and revolutionary spirit of that first event. A battle not just between men, but between entire martial arts legacies. Fact 4. In the untamed beginnings of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, the Octagon was a lawless frontier. There were no time limits, precious few rules, and most critically, no weight classes. This wasn't an oversight, it was the entire premise of the brutal experiment. The goal was to pit style against style in its purest form, to discover what truly worked in a real fight, regardless of physical stature. This philosophy created some of the most visually astonishing spectacles in combat sports history, true David versus Goliath scenarios made terrifyingly real. Look no further than the clash between the legendary Royce Gracie, the 216-pound pioneer of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Akebono Taro. A former Yokozuna Grand Champion in sumo, Akebono was a human mountain, tipping the scales at a jaw-dropping 420 pounds. This wasn't just a fight, it was a living thesis statement, a real-time demonstration that technique and leverage could indeed conquer sheer, overwhelming mass. Fact 5. Before the global superstars, the million-dollar pay-per-views, and the refined rules of a global sport, there was a far more primitive question at the heart of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. What happens when you put 2 men in a cage with almost no rules? In those chaotic early events, the rulebook was terrifyingly simple. There were only 2 things a fighter was forbidden from doing: fighting and eye gouging. Everything else was fair game. headbutt crashing into a brow, legal. A devastating kick to the groin, encouraged. Grabbing a fistful of hair to control an opponent's head for a knee strike, a perfectly acceptable strategy. This wasn't just a spectacle of brutality for its own sake. It was a raw, unfiltered experiment designed to answer which martial art was truly supreme in a real-world fight. Sumo wrestlers, boxers, karate masters, and unknown jiu-jitsu practitioners all entered the octagon under this gladiatorial rule set. It was a savage, anything-goes crucible that bore little resemblance to the sport we know today, a proving ground that would forever change the world of combat. Fact 6. When you picture Chuck Liddell, you see the iconic mohawk, the 1,000-yard stare, and the devastating overhand right that left a trail of legends in its wake. He was the Iceman, a figure of pure, primal ferocity. But behind that intimidating persona was a mind shaped by a very different kind of discipline. Long before he held UFC gold, Liddell was a student at California Polytechnic State University, San Luis Obispo, and his chosen field of study wasn't physical education or sports management. In 1995, Chuck Liddell graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in Business and Accounting. While there, he was also the captain of their Division I wrestling team, balancing the grueling demands of top-tier collegiate athletics with the meticulous world of ledgers and balance sheets. It's a fascinating duality. The man celebrated for his explosive, chaotic power possessed the patience and precision of a trained accountant. It proves that one of the most feared strikers in history was just as capable of calculating a knockout as he was of balancing the books. Fact 7. It is perhaps the single greatest business deal in the history of professional sports. In 2001, the Ultimate Fighting Championship was a fringe spectacle, a brand so toxic it had been effectively banished from television and dubbed human cockfighting by its detractors. On the verge of bankruptcy, it was purchased by casino magnates Lorenzo and Frank Fertitta, along with their high school friend Dana White, for just $2 million. What followed was a 15-year masterclass in brand rehabilitation and global expansion. Through relentless promotion, a push for athletic sanctioning, and the star-making power of reality television, they transformed the UFC from a pariah into a mainstream juggernaut. That initial $2 million gamble, a bet on a dying company, culminated in a staggering payoff. In 2016, the Fertittas sold their majority stake for over $4 billion, cementing an unprecedented return on investment and forever changing the landscape of combat sports. Fact 8. When the first Ultimate Fighting Championship exploded onto pay-per-view screens in 1993, the world didn't quite know what to call it. The promoters billed it as a no-holds-barred tournament, a raw contest of style versus style. Detractors labeled it with far more savage terms. The burgeoning sport lacked an identity, a proper name to legitimize its brutal ballet. The answer would come not from a fighter or a promoter, but from an unlikely source, a television critic. In his review of UFC 1 for the Los Angeles Times, Howard Rosenberg attempted to describe the chaotic fusion of kickboxing, wrestling, and jiu-jitsu he had just witnessed. Searching for the right words, he penned a simple, yet perfect three-word phrase. He called it mixed martial arts. Those words, first appearing in print for a mainstream audience, did more than just describe the action. They gave the chaos a name, a banner under which it could evolve from a controversial spectacle into the global athletic phenomenon we know today. Fact 9. It all began on a November night in 1993, inside Denver, Colorado's McNichols Sports Arena. The choice of city was no accident. It was a strategic masterstroke. In an era before the sport was sanctioned, most states had athletic commissions that would have instantly shut down the brutal spectacle the promoters had in mind. But Colorado, at the time, had no such governing body. This created a legal vacuum, a perfect loophole for an event advertised with a simple, terrifying tagline: "There are no rules." This lack of oversight was the entire point. It allowed the founders to stage a true, no-holds-barred tournament, an unfiltered experiment to answer the age-old question of which fighting style was truly supreme. It was here, in this regulatory grey area, that a sumo wrestler could face a Savate fighter, and a boxer could be submitted by a little-known art called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The decision to go to Denver wasn't just a logistical detail. It was the foundational act that allowed the raw, chaotic, and revolutionary sport of mixed martial arts to put your place of the fighting equating. Here's why it's Pomonet. It was the most famous proving ground in combat sports, the Octagon. For decades, its standard dimensions have measured a vast 30 feet in diameter. This sprawling canvas allows for a strategic dance, giving fighters ample room to maneuver, to set traps, and to dictate range with masterful footwork. But not all octagons are created equal. At the promotion's state-of-the-art Apex facility in Las Vegas, a different kind of arena awaits. Here, the cage is shrunk to just 25 feet across. This reduction in real estate is a deliberate choice, designed to fundamentally alter the nature of the fight. With less space to operate, there is nowhere to hide. The distance closes faster, forcing collisions and encouraging relentless forward pressure. It becomes a claustrophobic pressure cooker, increasing the statistical likelihood of finishes and rewarding aggressive, in-your-face styles. This subtle change in architecture creates a dramatically different environment, ensuring that when the cage door locks at the apex, action is not just expected, it's practically guaranteed. Fact 13. For its first 3 years, the Ultimate Fighting Championship was a uniquely American spectacle, raw, controversial, and confined entirely within the borders of the United States. But in 1996, the organization took its first tentative step onto the world stage. The destination was not a distant continent, but the island of Puerto Rico. UFC 8, aptly titled David vs. Goliath, descended upon the city of Bayamon, marking the first time the Octagon had been assembled outside the US mainland. While a US territory, it was a crucial test of the brand's international appeal. The event showcased the classic, chaotic feel of the era, featuring a one-night tournament won by Don Fry and a super fight between Ken Shamrock and Kimo Leopoldo. This night in the Caribbean was a gamble that signaled a much larger ambition. It was more than just another event. It was a declaration that the UFC was no longer content with being an American curiosity, planting the seed for the global phenomenon it would become. Fact 14. In the primal, unregulated crucible of the early Ultimate Fighting Championship, the man in the middle was little more than a spectator. The referee, a figure we now see as the ultimate authority on fighter safety, had no power to stop a contest. This created an unforgiving and dangerous landscape, almost unthinkable by today's standards. A fighter taking unanswered punishment could not be saved by an official's mercy. The bout would continue. The path to victory was narrow and absolute. A contest concluded only through the agonizing tap of a submission, the definitive finality of a knockout, or the desperate, last resort act of a fighter's corner throwing in the towel. The responsibility for survival rested solely on the combatants and their teams. It was a brutal, unfiltered test of will, where the only way out was to finish or be finished. This savage reality was the foundation upon which the modern, regulated sport was built, a stark reminder of just how far the UFC has come from its no-holds-barred origins. Fact 15. When you think of the early UFC, one name echoes louder than any other: Royce Gracie. His dominance in the initial, open-weight tournaments defined the promotion's chaotic beginnings, proving the supremacy of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to a mesmerized world. But while Gracie was the undisputed king of the tournament era, he was never a divisional champion in the way we understand it today. That honor, the title of the first ever UFC heavyweight champion, belongs to a different kind of pioneer. Enter Mark Coleman. An Olympian wrestler with punishing strength, the Hammer was the father of ground and pound, a terrifying style that would reshape the sport. At UFC 12, the promotion crowned its inaugural heavyweight king. In a battle against fellow legend Dan Severn, Coleman unleashed his relentless attack, forcing a submission to claim the belt. This wasn't just another tournament victory, this was history. Coleman's win established the most prestigious title in combat sports and marked the UFC's crucial evolution from a brutal spectacle into a structured professional league. Fact 16. By the time UFC 3 was scheduled for September 1994, the promotion was gaining momentum, but also attracting powerful enemies. The planned event in Charlotte, North Carolina, was met with a firestorm of legal and political opposition. Labeled as barbaric and inhumane by detractors, local officials moved to ban the event just days before it was set to begin, leaving the entire production in chaos. With fighters already arriving and tickets sold, the promoters scrambled, desperately searching for any jurisdiction that would allow them to proceed. The show, it seemed, was on the verge of collapse. Then an unlikely sanctuary emerged: Tulsa, Oklahoma. On incredibly short notice, the entire operation was uprooted and moved. The new venue wasn't a modern stadium or a grand hall, but a gritty rodeo arena. The iconic Octagon was hastily erected in the very same space where cowboys and bucking broncos usually held court. This last-minute relocation wasn't just a logistical nightmare, it was a defining moment that cemented the UFC's early reputation as a renegade outfit, willing to go anywhere to survive. Fact 17. In the early, untamed days of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, the absence of time limits was a core part of its brutal appeal. A fight only ended when one man could no longer continue. But this philosophy of endless combat met its breaking point at UFC 6. The heavily anticipated super fight between two of the sport's biggest stars, Ken Shamrock and Dan Severn, was meant to be a legendary clash. Instead, it became a legend for all the wrong reasons. For nearly 30 minutes, the two titans engaged in a tedious stalemate, a glorified staring contest punctuated by tentative grappling that went nowhere. The crowd grew restless, their cheers turning to a cascade of boos. The spectacle had become a snooze. Promoters realized that for the UFC to survive, it had to be exciting. And so, at the very next event, UFC 7, a fundamental change was made. time limits were introduced. It was the first major step in transforming the raw, unpredictable brawl into a structured, watchable sport, forcing a new pace and a new urgency that would forever alter the art of fighting. Fact 18. In the wild, formative years of the UFC, there was a tournament to end all tournaments. Billed as the ultimate, UFC 7 brought together past champions and fan favorites for a one-night, 8-man gauntlet to crown the undisputed king of the early era. It was a brutal crucible, and the man who walked through the fire was Dan the Beast 7. With his signature moustache and overwhelming wrestling prowess, 7 embodied pure physical dominance. On that single night in December of 1995, he stepped into the Octagon not once, not twice, but 3 separate times against 3 different opponents. He dispatched each one, culminating in a grueling victory over his legendary rival, Ken Shamrock, in the tournament final. It's a feat of endurance that is simply unfathomable in the modern sport, a testament to the iron will required to survive the promotion's unforgiving beginnings. For one night, Dan 7 wasn't just a champion, he was the ultimate champion, a title earned through a trial by combat that has never been repeated. Fact 19. The walkout. It's a ritual as old as combat itself, the final moments of calm before the storm. The roar of the crowd, the focused intensity in the fighter's eyes, and the music, that thundering anthem that announces their arrival. For many fans, the song is a window into the fighter's soul, a personal statement of intent. But the reality is more corporate than curated. While legends of the past could walk out to virtually any track they desired, that era of ultimate expression is over. Since 2014, the vast majority of the roster must choose their soundtrack from a pre-approved licensed library known as UFC Venom tracks. This move streamlines the broadcast and avoids the costly, complex web of music licensing issues that plague live events. It's a pragmatic business decision, but one that has undeniably standardized a moment once defined by its raw, unpredictable personality. The Warriors' hymn is no longer entirely their own, it's simply on loan from the company catalog. Fact 20. Tucked away just off the Las Vegas Strip stands a state-of-the-art mecca for mixed martial artists, the UFC Performance Institute. This facility is far more than just a gym, it's a laboratory dedicated to perfecting the human weapon. Here, every athlete on the UFC roster has access to a dedicated team of experts specializing in sports science, nutrition, physical therapy, and strength and conditioning. They receive personalized meal plans for optimal performance and safe weight cuts, cutting-edge rehabilitation to recover from the grueling demands of training, and bespoke conditioning programs to build championship-level endurance and power. And perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of this 30,000 square foot facility is the price of admission. It's completely free. This unprecedented investment provides every fighter, from the debuting prospect to the undisputed champion, with the resources to maximize their potential, ensuring a level playing field built on dedication and skill, not financial advantage. It's a testament to the evolution of the sport and the athletes who define it. From its controversial beginnings to its status as a global powerhouse, the story of the UFC is one of raw ambition, legendary athletes, and unforgettable moments. It's a world of discipline, drama, and pure spectacle. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey inside the Octagon. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's next. We want to hear from you, so drop a comment below with your favorite fact you learned today. We'll see you in the next one.